and hopefully that brings everyone into tune of what we're looking for. I mean, I don't know about your complete expertise, but you've got a lot of stuff to get out there. And as far as mine goes, I know that I've won quite a few leagues, I've lost quite a few leagues, and I've won daily fantasy football.
Hmm.
So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk daily fantasy football next week when we're a little bit more ready to go there. But tonight, today, it's this morning. I just realized on what time it really was.
It's been
We
that
are.
kind of week already.
It's been that kind of week. Well, I'm used to broadcasting at night, so for me, it's a little bit different. For you, you were up ready to go. I'm like, you wanted me here at what time?
Well, you got to get started early on the week for fantasy football, especially because you've got those waiver wire claims coming here on Wednesday. And what we're really looking at is we want to start out with, well, who's the winners of this week in fantasy football? Because I'll be honest, it was a rough week for me. I picked some Trevor Simeon stock this week, and he went out pretty early. But that doesn't mean that there weren't teams that even if there were injuries, those teams had some players that were winners. So.
So I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to go ahead and start off with who were the winners in our opinions. I think the biggest elephant in the room at this point has to be Atlanta Falcons. I mean,
Yeah.
Matt Ryan and there's this guy that's I think he's pretty good. His name's Julio Jones. Don't know if you've heard of him, and I know there's someone listening out there. He is an Alabama alum, that being Professor Graham Carpenter,
Yeah.
who's pretty excited about him, I assume.
I would assume that he would, especially, it's kind of rare for somebody to put up 300 yards receiving in a game. And I think that even on top of that, the Falcons are certainly a winner this week because as much as I loved Julio Jones' day, he didn't have just the biggest day for the Falcons. I mean, he had a huge day, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But you still had Tevin Coleman putting up points. You had Devontae Freeman with a touchdown. They've really figured out how to make that offense multiple beyond Julio Jones. So I think that that's become a big thing for them as well.
Well,
Um,
well, Julio Jones. I mean, yeah, he's had 300 yards. I mean, I'm concerned with him next week. We'll talk about the next week projections here later on in the show. But I mean, Julio Jones, one of six wide receivers to ever have 300 yards. One of six, and in this common era, the only person we can talk about doing that is Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. I got a question early on in the beginning of the week if I had to pick between Antonio Brown, Marvin Jones, or Julio Jones, and I was like, fade Julio Jones on that matchup because they're playing the Panthers. But I think it also speaks to just how bad that Panthers secondary really is right now, and how bad they're playing because they got three rookies out there and they look scared. They look scared to go up against a player like Julio Jones, and really, who wouldn't be? But at the same time, it was a historic performance, I think.
I know you're not a huge fan of Josh Norman, but what do you think about his comments on air talking about, well, you get what you pay for?
I think that it's Josh Norman likes to take shots fired.
Former Carolina Panther,
Former
I'm sorry.
Carolina Panther, and that shot fired is understandable. I'm not a big fan of Josh Norman just because, look, I know that he plays well and he's willing to get gritty inside of that. So he would have manned up on Julio Jones. He would have taken that matchup. Julio Jones still would have put up 150 on him. You look at the rest of that secondary, it was kind of embarrassing about what was happening. And everybody likes to point out what happened to Odell Beckham last year. Odell Beckham had 3 drops in the game last year
Right?
that would have gone for 70 yards. So I like Josh Norman, but it's not just a Josh Norman secondary. Josh Norman's one piece of that, but you take all of the people out of that secondary, you put a bunch of rookies in there, and that's where you're really starting to look at the Carolina Panthers might be somebody that you're willing to put your pass receivers in there, your quarterbacks in against if you're playing fantasy football.
And Carolina took another big hit. I mean, you have no Cam Newton. I
Yeah.
mean, he's going to be one of the losers of fantasy football this week, especially. But I mean, he's now that he's day to day with under the concussion protocol. You don't know what you're going to get with that. We'll go ahead and go over our matchups later on as well in the show. But he's obviously one of your top losers, and if not, possibly he's been a kind of a disappointment the first quarter of the season as it is. Anyways, he had
Yeah.
a good first showing. I think it was week 2. But against Denver's defense, against Atlanta, he didn't look very good. I mean,
And it hurts their run game too. The entire run game is a loser because if you can't get Cam going and you don't have Jonathan Stewart, Cameron Artis-Payne and Fozzie Whitaker, I know there are a ton of injuries out there in fantasy football right now at the running back position, but I'm not sure that I really want to be rolling with Carolina's running game either.
yeah, no. So far, I'm not a buyer on what Carolina's kind of put out there. I did pick up Fozzie Whitaker because I was in desperate need for a running back
Mhm.
last week, but I was completely stunned of what Atlanta's bringing on. And don't get me wrong, Atlanta's not a good defense,
No.
but they were able to control Carolina. and that's what was scary to me.
And getting ahead so early helps them do that. And I think that that's going to be something you watch again against both these teams. If it's going to be a close game, I don't see Julio Jones putting up the numbers he did last week against Denver's defense. And so really, it's kind of one of those week to week things where you expect big things from Julio Jones, but maybe you don't do that this week. Like I said, I know I didn't last week, but maybe I should have looked a little bit deeper at the way that that secondary was playing coming into the game.
Absolutely. So who was another winner in your mind that you're wanting to point out? We picked obviously that we it was very easy for me to go ahead and pick Atlanta Falcons. Who else?
Uh, I know I could go with another easy one. I think the Steelers are a huge winner. That entire offense is playing well. And when we talk about them in our matchup section, I really like them this week. But I think one of the winners that is going under the radar, and they're coming into a bye week. So I think it's a good time to start thinking about, can you trade for some of these players? Are players from the Seattle Seahawks. I think Russell Wilson really showed that even on a bum knee, he's got the arm talent to get the ball into tight windows. Doug Baldwin, since the middle of last year, has been a top 5 wide receiver, PPR, non PPR. I mean, the man is putting up fire numbers when it comes to touchdowns and receptions. And I think that Christine Michael is only going to continue to rush the ball well. And so even if you're looking at some of the players that are on the outside of that matchup, Jimmy Graham, we could be looking at Tyler Lockett. We could even go down to Thomas Rawls. These types of players that people might have dropped already, and they're coming into a bye week or will be dropping at this bye week. Look for them to continue that push to becoming an excellent offense, because I really just think that that offense is clicking on all cylinders, and with the bye week can get healthy.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned about Jimmy Graham because beginning of the season, no one was really going after Jimmy Graham. They thought he was trash. I'm looking at it. You look back from week 12 or the what was it, last 5 weeks before he got hurt
Mm-hmm.
and his season ended, he was one of the top tight ends that no one was talking about. And I'm like, Jimmy Graham, the only reason why everyone thinks he's trash is because he's no longer in New Orleans. It took him some time to get used to that offense in Seattle, and now he's starting to look like the Jimmy Graham that we remember.
And I,
And now people are like, oh, and I've gotten
mhm.
constant trade requests for Jimmy Graham. I'm like, no, I'm actually going to start starting him.
Well, and I think it took a while for their offensive coordinator Bevel over there to figure out exactly what they could do with Jimmy Graham, because they went from primarily a pass blocking offense. And I mean, they had Luke Wilson, the other Wilson brother, but they had Luke Wilson in there to kind of be that stretch the field seam route player. But my problem with that was that he was also a blocker. Jimmy Graham's not your blocker. He is a split out wide type tight end, and I think there's another one that's a winner from this week that we'll get to. But Jimmy Graham, I think, has finally found his spot in the offense, but the offensive coordinator has figured out how to get Jimmy Graham the ball in positions where he can win against safeties and linebackers, as opposed to being chipped on the way out by a defensive lineman or chipped on the way out by a linebacker.
Well, yeah, he's been able to show what he's been able to do. So what they've been able to do is they've actually pushed him out, split him out wide a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
He's still effective in the run game because he's not a blocking tight end. He's still somewhat effective because he's pulling out a linebacker,
Right.
allowing the or linebacker or a safety to focus on him, and he can still block. I mean, being a tight end in this league is still being able to be a blocker, but he doesn't have to be that guy. Like if you saw him, he was actually on the line last year, and he wasn't. He was just ineffective. Now that they got him split out, they put Wilson out on the. They put Wilson now as more of the blocking tight end,
Mm-hmm.
and still spread out Jimmy Graham, and it's making it still really effective, and I think it's awesome.
Well, and I think that you're seeing a lot of offenses go to that 3 wide with the tight end split out. Another offense that does that, and another winner from this week, is Jordan Reed. So if you think about the Washington Redskins, you may think about Deshaun Jackson or Matt Jones, but Jordan Reed is really the player that I think is a winner from this week, because they got back to what they did last year for Kirk Cousins. The reason Kirk Cousins was such a good quarterback last year is he had all these options in the middle of the field. The first few games this year, they were really throwing deep. They had Deshaun Jackson. They're trying to utilize him. They get Josh Dotson in the draft this year. They're really trying to stretch the field vertically. But when you get a tight end like Jordan Reed, who can sit there in the slot position, be lined up on a slower linebacker or a smaller safety, you get an option to go in the middle and down the seam in a way that nobody else can do that, because he can take the hits that your wide receiver, you don't want them taking. And so I think that Jordan Reed, in an offense that continues to split out a tight end, is also another winner this week, like Jimmy Graham, because they're getting utilized very similarly.
It's funny to me when you're a playoff team like the Washington Redskins were last year, and they pick up a wide receiver, they automatically think that they need to be better than what they were last year by trying to do something by taking away their identity in what really got them there, i.e. Jordan Reed, who was healthy for the first time last year, and he really utilized his presence,
Hmm.
and he was huge. They got away from that the first 3 weeks.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, essentially. I mean, they still got him the ball, but I think they were really trying to make all the wide receivers happy. The James Crowder, the well, I think I said his first name wrong, but the Crowders, the Deshaun Jacksons, and now the Doxsons and the Pierre Garcons. They've got 4 good wide receivers.
Right.
But ultimately, when it comes down to it, is that Jordan Reed is what's going to make your offense click and your running game.
And that's a West Coast type offense as well. So when we start thinking about really the 49ers of the old, when you had Jerry Rice, when you had Ricky Waters some years, when you had that offense clicking, what really happened is that tight end position with Brent Jones. When we think about a pass catching tight end, you might not think about Brent Jones, but he was that historical tight end that really got both pass and block. And so now as it's evolved away from the run game, those West Coast offenses need a tight end that can continue to catch the ball in the middle of the field. And I think that ultimately is what's going to benefit Jordan Reed is when they get back to the fundamentals of that offense, and he's going to continue to do well.
It's pretty funny you think about something like that. I mean, we're fairly old school when the tight end position. Well, the tight end position was it was starting to come in a different kind of light. Anyways, think back 15, 20 years ago where you had the Brent Joneses, the Jay Novaceks, guys like that were really utilizing their ability to be a pass catching tight end, which not many people heard about.
Right.
These were the guys that kind of set that kind of landmark to start things going. And there are plenty of other tight ends, but I'm just using them as 49er fans and Cowboy fans know who those two guys are.
Right.
So Jordan Reed is starting to become is becoming that guy we all thought he would be fantasy wise, and he's really starting to really show his light now. A guy that I've actually very truly enjoyed, and a lot of people didn't put him as a third running back, is DeMarco Murray.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's been essentially the best running back out there. I mean, where's Todd Gurley been? It's like, well, if I was to tell you at the beginning of the year that Todd Gurley was going to have less fantasy points than someone like DeMarco Murray, who everyone was predicting was going to be split in time with Derrick Henry, everyone would laugh at me.
Right.
I mean, DeMarco Murray was picked around the 10th round, and here was Todd Gurley picked number 3 overall.
Right. Well, and I think that especially as we get away from the pass catchers back to the running back position, DeMarco Murray is definitely a winner from this week, and somebody that I think moving forward, the scare for Derrick Henry was real at the beginning of the year, but he's had multiple touchdowns now in back-to-back games, DeMarco Murray, and he played against my Raiders, so I kind of understand how that happened. Our defense is not the best right now. It's all right. They're going to tighten it up. But I think that moving forward, you look at that division, and I think that that's one of the things people don't think about. They've got division matchups against the Colts. They've got division matchups against the Jaguars. They've got division matchups now against the J.J. Wattless Houston Texans. You want a running back that's going to continue to produce all year. You might start looking at DeMarco Murray as somebody. His value is going to be high right now. His owner is going to love DeMarco Murray right now. They think they're getting really good value. But I honestly think that as the season goes on, he's a winner for this week and will continue to do well. But you might want to look to sell high or go out and get him because of the fact that I think that you can get a good running back or give up something that you don't want, like a Todd Gurley. Because as somebody who drafted Todd Gurley, I'm certainly now regretting that pick at the top of the draft.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's funny because a lot of us talk about running backs are, to me, running backs were essential for my drafts. A lot of the drafts I've done, oh gosh, I'll have to tell you off air how many drafts I've done. But and I'm also big into daily fantasy, as we mentioned at the beginning at the top of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But Todd Gurley, I actually kind of tried to stay away from unless I had no other option. I also went for Adrian Peterson. Oh, that hurts.
That's a stinger.
But you know what? We'll save that part for the waiver wire kind of topic as well when we talk about the Minnesota Vikings. But Todd Gurley was one of the huge ones, and and we were talking about tight ends, and we're big on Jordan Reed. We're big on Jimmy Graham. What about Rob Gronkowski? Who? I mean, the Gronk. Where's he been? Well, things are going to be kind of good for the New England Patriots starting, well, what was it, 12:01 on Sunday.
Well, and, I think that it's kind of like getting the band back together if we start thinking about the Patriots, right? I've got Dion Lewis stashed on an IR spot right now. I can't wait till he gets back for that offense. I like James White. I like LeGarrette Blount. but they didn't pay Dion Lewis all that money just to kind of sit there when he comes back from injury. Same thing with Gronkowski. They restructured his contract. They paid him more money. But what I think they're doing is they wanted to wait until Tom had all of his options and all of his
Right.
weapons, because they really are the deepest and best team in the NFL, in my opinion. Even better than the Seahawks, I think. Even though that Seahawks defense is great, Tom Brady really knows how to use Edelman, how to use Gronk. Oh, and by the way, they also have Martellus Bennett. That man can put up numbers in a hurry if you do not cover him while he is running free in the secondary. And we saw that this week. Even though they still didn't have a good game, they got shut out. Martellus Bennett had a good game. And so I think the tight end position, Rob Gronkowski and Bennett in that offense, is only going to get better when Tom Brady's now looking at them in the middle of the field. I think that he's definitely coming back from a sore hamstring, if you will. I think they've been holding him
If
back.
you listen to us on the air.
Yeah. So, and I think that if you think about the way that he's been kind of held back, I think the Patriots were just biding their time. Get healthy, play well.
As much as I didn't want to bring this up because I kind of had to sit back and think about this as you were talking. Remember back about 4 years ago when Rob Gronkowski was just getting really into the league, really starting to get his feet wet, however you want to use the terminology. He had another guy that was with him at that time, and a guy that's now in prison. But that being
Hernandez.
Aaron Hernandez.
Mhm.
Well, now that and that duo was huge.
Mhm.
I thought they were great. I think that Aaron Hernandez, if he wouldn't have made his mistakes like he did, that tandem would be huge for the next. I don't know. You give him 10 years. I mean, how many people have ever talked about a tight end tandem the way that that tandem could have been? Well, now you got somebody that can do what that other person could have done in Martellus Bennett. This tandem can be. Is there enough balls to go around to Julian Edelman, Martellus Bennett, Amendola, and Rob Gronkowski and Dion Lewis?
And Chris Hogan. I think that
Yes.
I think that offense again is primed for a breakout. You start looking at teams that kind of have been meandering on their own a little bit. The Patriots, although not winners this week, they got boat raced, I think, by Rob Ryan's defense, but they're playing with their third string quarterback. I mean, who doesn't get kind of hurt in that situation? So you look at Tom Brady coming back, Edelman's value goes up, Gronkowski's value goes up, Bennett. I think that because they don't have a stretch the field kind of receiver as well, all of those receivers become really important to them. So I think there's plenty of balls to go around. We might see Tom throw it 45 times, and even if a few of those footballs are flat, I still think that they're going to be able to catch the way that ball comes into the cradle for them. So I like the pass catchers on that offense.
We're still in the middle of our winners of week 4 here on the Fantasy Football Classroom. We're going to take a small break. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and still talk about some of the winners, but we're going to get into some of the losers here on the Pacific Tiger Radio Network, 91.9 FM, and on the 209 Sports YouTube channel. JB Jeff Dominic along with Professor Stephen Farias. We'll be right back.
Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wow, jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's true. I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh. I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. Take 1.
Behold the angry giant.
Try it again, Alberto.
Behold the angry giant.
Perfect. Good luck tonight.
Behold the angry giant.
Yay! Read me another one, Dad.
This is WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
So when you get to the corner of Smith and Orchard, you're going to want to take a
You
left.
are not going to
then
believe
what you're
this.
going to do is turn
Marcy
into
and
Marcy
Brad
Avenue
just broke up,
and go past
and
the
apparently
first 3
she's
lights,
happy
and then
about
take
it.
the next left.
I don't
Then
really
drive
think
5
she's
more
happy,
blocks,
but
and you should be
who am
there.
I to judge, right?
Park
anyway,
on the right.
That's
I'll
what
see
I
you
heard
later
last
tonight.
night.
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to the Fantasy Football Classroom here on 91.9 FM, the Pacific Tiger Radio Network, and on the 209 Sports YouTube channel. I am JD Jeff Dominic. Alongside with me is Professor Stephen Farias. We have been going over this week's winners and losers here for the NFL Fantasy Football Week 4. So far, we've been kind of diving into the winners, but we're going to start transitioning and moving out and getting into the losers here in just a moment. But we wanted to throw out a couple winners. I think we're going to skim over one and then really throw in one. I think that the big guy that no one, I think more or less been a sleeper so far this season, but having a great year is the rookie Will Fuller.
Oh, he's having one hell of a start to the rookie season. He continues to be Brock Osweiler's go-to when it comes to receivers in the flat, that short, intermediate passing game that they like to do. Bill O'Brien's offense requires, much like the offense in New England uses kind of that short pass catcher. I really think that Will Fuller is going to benefit from the fact that there's increased focus on DeAndre Hopkins. Of course, you got to focus on him. He can go up and catch the ball with anybody. But I think that because of that extra focus on DeAndre Hopkins, that means that Will Fuller is getting a ton of looks, a ton of balls, and he's a huge, huge player so far.
But you're also at the same time not ready to buy on him. Not yet.
Not yet. I think that as a rookie, we're looking at the wall that he might be approaching here soon. And I'm also kind of looking at the matchup this week.
Right.
And we get into our matchup section. They're playing a defense in Minnesota that with Xavier Rhodes and with a secondary that can hit hard. I like Will Fuller, but the problem's going to be that we've got some big DBs this week that can match up with the Houston Texans. Also, according to Vegas, your lowest projected line in terms of over-under, 39.5 points. I don't think Will Fuller has a big week this week, and I think that actually is proved by somebody who didn't have a big week and is one of our losers this week, Odell Beckham.
Yeah, nice transition. Exactly where I was going to go with that is that Odell Beckham, I mean, where has he been? He was highly regarded as one of the top, I'm going to say top 5 wide receivers picked in the majority of fantasy football leagues, and he has been, I mean, heck, I mean, I'd much rather have Victor Cruz right now than him. I mean, it's just because statistically right now. And I think that a lot of defenses like Minnesota did last night, a lot what Josh Norman has done against him, not only last year, but recently playing against the Washington Redskins. I think he's really, truly, I think they've frustrated him so much that I think he's just it takes him out of his game, and he's basically we lose a wide receiver if you have him as one of your top receivers.
Well, I think that defensive has started to move to that muddy zone. If you were watching the game last night, John Gruden tried to explain what a muddy zone was. I'm not going to do that. Gruden's got it much better than I do, but basically it means that the linebacker and the safety are both cluing in a zone, and then also paying attention to a man that might be coming out of the backfield. So what's happening is you've got basically double coverage on Odell Beckham every time, and so a lot of people are blaming McAdoo for this problem. I just think it's Eli Manning scared to throw into certain windows, and I like Eli Manning as a quarterback. I think you should keep him, but I think really you need to start fading Odell Beckham based on the type of defense they're playing. Last night, if you played Odell Beckham, I know I did because you got to. It's still, I knew he wasn't going to put up big numbers, and it felt better knowing that I already really lost this week that I had him going, because I was like, he's not going to put up huge numbers. But I don't think that anybody in that offense could really put up huge numbers against Minnesota.
No, and I think as we're kind of transitioning from winners to losers, I think one of the biggest winners also is if you played two defenses right this week, and one of them being the Buffalo Bills, because a shutout means you guaranteed yourself 10 points no matter what. Depending on what else they did is great. But also the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are on a tear right now. They've only allowed 50 points, which in 4 games, which if you add it all up, you're roughly around 12 to 13 points a game, and we'll talk about that also a little bit later, but I know we're going to touch on it here real quick. But they're just doing something that they haven't done since 1988. So back in 1988, they didn't have fantasy football like we do now. But ultimately, I think it's one of the most underrated defenses that a lot of people don't really give a lot of respect to.
And I think that if we think to the operations of Mike Zimmer, to the way that defense is multiple, can go 3-4, can go 4-3, plays nickel a ton, and can still rush the passer from those kinds of sets. I think that they're fast, they hit hard. I mean, I was watching receivers get crushed last night, even as they were going to the ground, hitting hard, and that really puts a damper on the rest of the wide receivers. And so even though the Giants got loose for some big gains, they've got a good defense that really doesn't give up a ton of points. Bends sometimes, it doesn't break. Reminds me a lot of the Seahawks about 4 years ago, where you had Richard Sherman, you had Browner, you had Earl Thomas, you had all these young secondary players to mix in with some, I think, mediocre linebackers. Same thing in Minnesota. Their linebackers aren't all pro linebackers, but they still play well, and everything around them in terms of the setup with Mike Zimmer helps them play up to that potential.
Absolutely. I mean, and so, as much as we're trying to get away from the winners, there were just actually, the more we thought about it, the more that we realized there are a ton of winners. But let's talk about another loser. And this one was one of the biggest losers was OBJ.
Right.
But for me, for myself personally, somebody that I started in a couple of my leagues, Matthew Stafford.
Oh, yeah.
Chicago Bears defense is horrendous, and yet we're here talking about that they're not that good. I mean, and yet Matthew Stafford was only allowed to give up or put out 10 points against them. That's rough.
And I think that this is the thing, the week to week that happens in the NFL that I try to remind myself of, that you couldn't have predicted this in any way. But Matthew Stafford, Jim Bob Cooter's offense has really accentuated what Matthew Stafford can do. And the man can throw the ball as well as any other quarterback in the league. But the problem I have this week is watching the fact that he doesn't have a run game. And so with Amir Abdullah out, and they went to Dwayne Washington, and then Washington got hurt, absent that running back that can really take pressure off the linemen and the linebackers. So they're running 7 in the box because they know that there's not a pass catcher out of the backfield they have to worry about. So, I mean, if you're worried about Matthew Stafford, that Golden Tate might have to start coming into the backfield more. And if Golden Tate has to come into the backfield more, that means that there's more ability to focus on Marvin Jones on the outside. There's more ability to concentrate in the middle. I really starting to really bunch up for the Lions, and that's going to hurt Matthew Stafford moving forward as well. One other loser that I really want to get to, that somebody that you might have not been predicting to do well, but still is underperforming even where they were at, is Willie Snead. I think that in terms of that Saints offense, Snead is one of the best route runners. And it's just becoming one of those week-to-week plays with Willie Snead. I think we can look at some pass catchers that have underperformed this week. You look at DeAndre Hopkins, you look at Amari Cooper. Yeah, they're losers. But when you start thinking about the way that Saints offense put up 35 points away from the Dome against the Chargers, and the Chargers aren't a great defense by any means, and the fact that Willie Snead didn't have any of that production, you're really starting to look at an offense where it's centered around Drew Brees spreading the ball around too much for you to really rely on any single pass catcher, any single receiver in that offense right now. And so I'm looking at the Saints as a winner overall. Their offense is strong, but Willie Snead in that offense really becoming one of the people that I'm starting to fade in some of my leagues.
Well, and as much as you mentioned about Willie Snead, I kind of say the same thing about Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks had probably one of the biggest. I mean, out of the 3 wide receivers that we could probably mention with the Saints, he was the top one.
Right,
I mean,
right.
everyone would look for him. Brandon Cooks, former Lincoln product, right here in Stockton, California. Want to make sure we throw that all out there
Yep.
because we are proud of him. But at the same time, fantasy-wise, you're killing me, man. But 2 consecutive quiet games for Cooks. Through this one, one was at least worth 3 times as much as his week 3 effort. He had 3 fantasy points last week. I mean, it's just 14 targets combined in those games, only 5 catches, 4 points really to show for. I mean, it's really just been a tough go around for him.
And I think that Cooks is struggling with the same thing that Snead is struggling with. You get out of that dome, you're not as fast when you're out on the natural field, and in many ways, Drew Brees is going to throw to the open guy. So if that's Travaris Cadet 30 times a game, Drew Brees is going to throw to Travaris Cadet 30 times a game if you're going to allow him to do that. And so really what we're looking at is an offense that is a boomer bust each week unless you're Drew Brees. So luckily for some of you, they're on a bye this week, so you don't got to worry too much about what's happening in that situation. But I would really think about only starting some of those wide receivers depending on matchups when they're playing at home. Because at home, I mean, Willie Snead's only ever scored a touchdown at home. Brandon Cook scores a majority of his touchdowns at home, and he burnt the Raiders week 1. But beyond that, we're really looking at somebody who's a wide receiver 2, 3, both of them.
Yeah, and it's funny because, it's like I was looking at a lot of my losers, and okay, so I'm sorry, I had to look at something, making sure that we were live, and we are live. I just was getting a little nervous because I wasn't too sure. But anyways, because hey, I mean, as much as I think we've got a lot of the bugs taken out of there, I think we're still learning some things as we go. But anyways, what's funny about it is that I have a lot of the people that we're talking about losers, they're all team oriented. Brandon Cooks for the Saints. A lot of wide receivers for the Saints.
Right.
I mean, right now you just don't know who's going to have a big day, and I think a lot of it is because they're looking at Brandon Cooks being the number 1. But I'm also concerned with his injuries. He's had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years since he's entered the league. But I also look at another one being that I'm afraid of Golden Tate. Golden Tate got this big contract when he left Seattle. I wouldn't say a big contract, but he got a good contract when he left Seattle. And Marvin Jones has taken that number 1 spot, and realistically, both of them couldn't separate themselves against that Chicago Bears defense, and that has to be concerning with me when you can only do that. You can't do that against Chicago.
No, and like I said, I think that the bunching of it hurt. And really, I think that what we're focusing on is these are teams that don't have run games. And so if you're looking at a player that needs to be downgraded in terms of what the effect is on the offense, I'm also looking at running backs that need to be downgraded. Somebody like Latavius Murray. I drafted Latavius in a lot of rounds. I'm a Raider fan. Homer, admit it multiple times. You'll hear me say that all season. But one of the things that I did was think, all right, they're going to run the ball a lot. Well, they haven't been running the ball with Latavius Murray, and that's hurt their passing game. I mean, Michael Crabtree had a huge Donald Trump huge kind of game.
Huge.
But I think one of the problems is that's because you can't throw on the outside. If you don't have that play action pass for Amari Cooper to get open, another Alabama product, not playing as well as Julio Jones. But if you don't have the ability for him to get open like Julio Jones does off the play action, or have Latavius Murray running the ball, then what's really happening is that Raiders offense becomes compacted. So every time I think about a loser, I think about an offense that doesn't really have a good running game right now, or we can't pinpoint a running back that's doing well. Same thing I think in Kansas City with Spencer Ware. Spencer Ware, I had him in some leagues. That 46-yard gain at the end of the game kind of helped me out. But beyond that, if you don't have a running game for Andy Reid's offense, that's not going to be helping you out at all.
Yeah, I mean, Jamal Charles has been hurt, and you had Spencer Ware, as you just mentioned, and those guys are good, but I mean, you went up, and here's the other thing too, is you went up against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which they're good, and they're
they got
very young.
Embarrassed the week before, though.
They did. You're absolutely right, and that's where we kind of are going to go into the buy and sell kind of situation here in just a little bit too. And I got to notice that we have about 60 listeners. So listening right now. So thank you all for listening. I wanted to make sure that we appreciate everybody that is tuning in today, this morning. It's like I said, for me, it's early, but then again, you know what? For me, it is early because technically today's my day off, but I'm doing what I enjoy. And as soon as you gave me the opportunity to say, hey, let's go do this in the morning, I was all gung-ho for it because, I mean, I'm on radio. So
well, and I think it's important because I got a lot of friends that are they're going to call me out when I start losing fantasy football games, and I know that that's going to happen, and I'm okay with it because at the very least, I'm going to be bold with what I'm going to tell you all out there about how to win money if you play for money, or at the very least, how to win your fantasy league, because I know that it's not gambling technically. People just like to hang out together, pull some money together. But at the end of a week, when you start looking at some of these players, you might actually have something on the line. So I want to help you out with that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's been awesome so far. We just got started. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a small break. And when we get to that, what we're going to do is we're going to start transitioning into the waiver wire kind of stuff. I mean, we're still going to talk about winners and losers, but I think it's time to kind of incorporate the waiver wire and who you may be looking forward to, or may not truly know if he's out there or not.
I got my sleeper coming up. You all better be listening for that.
I've got mine too. So we'll go ahead and take a small break. You're listening to the Fantasy Football Classroom right here on the 209 Sports YouTube channel and on the Pacific Tiger Radio Network 91.9 FM. We'll be right back.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go fish, Dad!
Oh, come on! This is WWE Superstar Titus O'Neil. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. But every driver seeks the pinnacle of their achievements. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Como 2.340.000 sonrisas, 28.800 besos de buenos días, 110 viajes increíbles y unas copas. Hay una vida entera de su compañía que su familia no podrá disfrutar. Todo porque él decidió manejar después de tomar unas copas y murió en un choque. No pierdas tanto por culpa de tan poco. Manejar medio tomado es igual que manejar borracho. Un mensaje del Departamento de Transporte de Estados Unidos y de Ad Council.
It's 6:42 p.m. Time for Steve Plotto and his son Dylan to do the dishes. They talk about everything from the yuckiness of girls to the awesomeness of his soccer team. Sometimes they don't talk at all. Then, hey! The dreaded splash fight. It's Dad o'clock, and it's the best time of the day. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
We're rewarding you for something you already do, listening to us. It's Radio Loyalty, and it's an easy way for you to get free stuff. All you do is sign up. Go ahead and click the banner now. You'll earn points as you listen. Points you can trade in for great products and services in the Radio Loyalty store. You can earn even more points when you share your favorite station with friends on Facebook and Twitter. Radio Loyalty. It's free to sign up, so click the banner to join now.
Okay, so
5 tacos of cheese and a large soda. That's $10,012. Please drive around.
Wait, 10,000 what?
It's obvious you're buzzed and driving.
I've only had a few. I'm fine.
Yeah, the food's $12, but getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Please drive around. Actually, just park and come in.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearms storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
I heard on the news about that 5-year-old who found his uncle's gun. The kid didn't know it was loaded.
I heard on the news about that 14-year-old girl who was bullied online. For like a year, she couldn't take it anymore, so she got her dad's gun from his nightstand.
I heard on the news about that guy who broke into someone's house, stole a gun from the hall closet.
He accidentally shot his cousin in the head.
She killed herself.
And later, killed the owner of the store he was trying to rob.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearms storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the
Welcome back to Fantasy Football Classroom here on 91.9 FM, the Pacific Tiger Radio Network, as well as on the 209 Sports YouTube channel. I am JD Jeff Dominic. Alongside with me is Professor Stephen Farias. I emphasize that now because I'm so afraid to say, and I know you've heard them all. I mean, it's one of those deals, but at the same time, I make it a point. And it's funny because I do that same thing with one of the Pacific Tigers women's basketball players. I emphasize her name, and that's Gianna Ulu Summers.
Okay.
So I'm very focused on making sure I don't mess up a last name. So I really emphasize your last name. So if at some point you'll get tired of it, but at the same time,
if you just want to shorten it to the professor, we can work on that too.
Oh, well, you know what? We'll figure something out with that. So anyways, I like it though. I like where this is going. But anyways, thank you all for joining us tonight. Gosh. I'm so used to saying, I'm so used to broadcasting at night. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We are just around the 10:45 time frame. So thank you again. We are in the middle of talking about our winners and losers and for the NFL Fantasy Football Week number 4. We're going to start getting into a little bit more of the waiver wire. And, if we have a couple other losers that maybe losers this week coming up in week 5. Mm-hmm. So there are going to be a few. I know I'm going to have a few out there. And I think when we go into our matchups, I think that's when we're going to hit our winners and losers predictions of next week. So or of this week coming up, which is coming up Thursday, Niners versus the Arizona Cardinals. So, but anyways, in the middle of it, do we have any other losers that we need to make sure we get out there, or have we thrown enough trash out of the window?
I think most of it's out the window. At least I hope so. I haven't looked at my lineup yet this week, so there could be a few more losers on there. I think if you're looking at quarterbacks, Jameis Winston going to continue to be a loser this week. Loser last week. Somebody that I thought would take the next step, but I really think that quarterback-wise, if you don't have one of those top 5, you're playing week to week anyway. So
see, I'm a little different on that. I think Jameis Winston will be okay.
Okay.
I think he'll be a good number 2 quarterback if you have something else better available. You look at the defenses he's played against.
Yeah.
Broncos are one of them. I don't think anybody could have really, done great against them. The Los Angeles Rams they're a good physical defense. So those are 2 teams that he's played against in consecutive weeks that have just been really tough on him. So I think that not necessarily pump the brakes on him, but at the same time, keep your options definitely open.
And he is playing that Carolina defense, which I hammered pretty hard in that first segment when we're talking about somebody that you might want to play him against. Just playing him this week, but I'm still kind of tempering. Big loser this week, and he's just not making good decisions with the ball. But I think that translates to a lot of young quarterbacks, but maybe not somebody that's on your fantasy waiver wire look.
Well, I mean, and a lot of people get scared of sophomore slumps. I think I wouldn't necessarily call this a sophomore slump, but I mean, the numbers wise, he has definitely gone down quite a bit. So,
and he had 15 picks last year and four fumbles lost. He's already got 8 and 2 this year. He's halfway with what he was last year. It's just concerning.
Absolutely, and a lot of it also is he's going through a different offense too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely different coaching staff. Lovie Smith no longer there, which I thought was a bad fire, but we can talk about that and go into that rant some other time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about who are you looking for that may be out there on the waiver wire that we need to have.
Well, if you've got Jameis Winston and you're concerned about him like I am, you might be looking for a quarterback in Carson Wentz. Wentz only owned in 36% of Yahoo leagues. I like Carson Wentz. Here's the thing about Carson Wentz that I don't think people understand. He is a rookie, but he's making all the line checks, all the run checks, which means that his coaches have a ton of confidence in him. And in an offense that it has playmakers. You've got Jordan Matthews. He gets Zach Ertz back this week. And I'm not going to step on my sleeper too much, but he's got a good running game that we're going to get to here in a second. I think Carson Wentz is somebody that you want to be looking at, especially given the fact that he's coming back against a defense that I think is winnable against in Detroit, where he could start really putting up some numbers this week, especially in a dome. So I like Carson Wentz a lot, but I think there's a quarterback that you like even more than Wentz.
Well, there's a few of them. I mean, right now I'm actually looking forward to, if we're going week to week, and if for whatever reason your top quarterback got hurt or he's just not what you expected, you have a Cam Newton. I like Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I think Carson Wentz is the legit truth when it comes to the quarterback position. I think he's going to be a great quarterback fit in Philadelphia. My problem is that he's a rookie.
Right.
Defenses hadn't had a chance to learn him quite yet. Now they've had 4 weeks. Remember, in preseason, he wasn't around.
Oh, yeah.
So they've now had 4 weeks to kind of game plan for him a little bit. The thing is that he showed his true colors against Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I mean, he looked great. Didn't turn over the ball. He didn't do lots of things. I've got a few quarterbacks that I'm looking forward to coming up. But for now, if you're talking about, oh crud, I need a quarterback this week, I'm gonna sit there and tell you, I think we should look for somebody like that's in his sophomore year. That's Marcus Mariota. I think that he's game planned very well. He's got Delaney Walker. His wide receivers are solid at best. But he's got his legs. He's got a good running game, and I think nobody predicted DeMarco Murray still to predict what he's doing right now. So I'm going to say that Marcus Mariota going in against the Miami Dolphins, even though it's in Miami, I think that Marcus Mariota may have a good day.
And I think that Mariota benefits from those short passes, and especially against really a front that's not getting pressure on a quarterback. I think Mariota, is still struggling with some options in terms of reading coverages when it comes to the blitz. But I think he's doing an exceptional job when he gets time to throw. And I think that he's going to get that time this week. And I think in terms of that, talking about a running game, I'm going to throw out my sleeper here of the week that I think that people need to be looking at on the waiver wire. Again, coming back to that Philadelphia offense, because I think that one of the things that we think about is Marcus Mariota, Carson Wentz, they benefit from a good run game. Marcus Mariota is going to benefit from DeMarco Murray. Carson Wentz going to benefit from, you're going to hear me say this a lot, Wendell Smallwood. Yeah, I know that Ryan Matthews, Darren Sproles in that offense, those are the big names. Matthews gets hurt too often. I know he's a Fresno State product. We love our Central Valley products. However, the thing about Ryan Matthews is he can't stay on the field. And even though he's going to play this week, Wendell Smallwood is a rookie running back that's going under the radar. I think everybody needs to pick up. 12% owned in Yahoo leagues. I think he's a must-own in 12-team leagues. This guy had as many plus 10 rushes last year in college football as Derrick Henry and Leonard Fournette, your two top running backs for the Heisman. He played at West Virginia, so he's not getting big name product in terms of where he's coming from. But still, in that offense, he carried the ball 17 times for 79 yards 2 weeks ago, and he's getting praise from his coaches and Doug Peterson. And Doug Peterson shown he's not afraid to go with the rookie. So I like Wendell Smallwood as a pickup that will continue to help a rookie quarterback.
And you mentioned Carson Wentz real quick. On the ESPN Fantasy Football Leagues, he's actually owned by only 20% of leagues.
So even fewer than in Yahoo.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's somebody that you're going to, at least, if you haven't picked him up now, one, you better have a darn good quarterback, i.e. Matt Ryan or somebody like that. Or two, I mean, where you been? I mean, it's Carson Wentz is the real deal. I think he's going to be good. I still kind of go, okay, I'd much rather have him at number 2, just whether my quarterback goes on a bye week or whatever. But for me, because I just rookies are still rookies to me. It's just kind of hard for me to go and click the trigger because it's very often or very few that you get somebody who has a great rookie year like Jameis Winston did last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for us to predict something like that.
Well, and I think that, again, if you were sleeping the first 4 weeks of the season, Carson Wentz is out there for you. I got a friend, Bobby, who likes to say that he tried to set his lineup, but never actually sets his lineup. And so, he comes into it midway and says, how good was my team? And so I think that Carson Wentz is a good pickup. If you're somebody like my friend Bobby that likes to sleep for the first 4 weeks and then go, what's happening in football now? Another quarterback that people might be considering, and I know that we're focusing on the quarterbacks and some running backs here in the waiver wire. Think about Brian Hoyer. That offense against the Lions, it wasn't fantastic, but if you need somebody to plug and play, Hoyer is going to put up okay numbers. I mean, he's not going to be a world beater by any means, but he is going to give you an opportunity to not lose your week of fantasy football. So if you're like players out there that might have Drew Brees on a bye, or if you're a player that had Blake Bortles or Russell Wilson, look at Brian Hoyer, somebody that you could pick up as well.
See, I'm a little bit leery about Brian Hoyer, but that's because I don't know what's going on with their starting quarterback, and so it's kind of like, oh crud, do I want to take that risk? Because truth be told,
I think John Fox wants to take that risk. That's the key part. Is I don't think he has any trust in Cutler.
Well, and Cutler, I don't either. But and I was actually big on Cutler. I thought Cutler may have a better year this year, second year under Fox, things like that. I'm done. I've completely written him off, and I think that the Chicago Bears are going to be done with him after this year too. I mean, in all honesty, I mean, it's one of those things. You know who I also kind of was thinking about was somebody. Well, actually, this was come from our third member of our team who will hopefully be here next week. He's covering an event on his own, per his his paying job, what he has to actually do.
Yeah.
He talked about Brian Hoyer. He also talked about Joe Flacco and Dak Prescott.
Oh yeah, two excellent pickups, I think. Flacco,
that's a Super Bowl MVP.
Well, and Flacco's showing that he can get the ball to Steve Smith. I mean, if you can't get this ball to Steve Smith, you got a problem. Even at 39, Steve Smith is a beast when he's in the open field. Again, put up big numbers on my Raiders this week. So I think Joe Flacco's a definite pickup, given the fact that they're also playing a Washington defense who they have Josh Norman, but not a whole lot else. Remember that Odell Beckham had his best game of the year when he played against the Redskins. So I think that at the very least, we're looking at a quarterback that could get big there. And then again, I think that if you start looking at an offense that's tailored to a rookie quarterback, Dak Prescott, he's got a good running game. He might have Dez back this week. He might not, but he's still going to go underneath. He's got Cole Beasley, Jason Witten, likes to throw that underneath pass. He's going to get you a ton of completions, a lot of yardage, maybe not as many touchdowns, but he's still going to be efficient.
Here's the thing, though. I looked at Dak Prescott and who he played last week was okay considering that he didn't have his top wide receiver, Dez Bryant. And he played against the San Francisco 49ers, who lost one of their best defender, in that being, and their team leader in both aspects in that locker room is Navarro Bowman. He's done. ACL gone. So he played against a not really peppy kind of team.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, he played against the San Francisco 49ers, and I'm a Niners fan, and I was like, I'm out. I knew that Dallas was going to win. Granted, they scored 14 points against in the first half against a bad defense, that being the Cowboys. But Dak Prescott found you ways not to lose a game. He's 131 completion or pass attempts, no interceptions. He's a very smart quarterback, but he's playing against the Cincinnati defense, who just got Vontaze Burfict back last week.
Well, and so that's fair. It's good to remember who they're playing against. Again, if you're still looking for somebody to fill in, I don't think Dak Prescott is a horrible option, even against that Cincinnati defense. Remember, this is the same Cincinnati defense that the Patriots came in with backup QBs and pretty much put to task. And so I think underneath-wise, even though you got Burfict back, there's a good chance he gets 2 personal fouls in the first half anyways, with the way that he likes to go and headhunt some receivers. And so it's the way he plays. He plays physical. It's not a criticism of him, but they've been on top of that. So I'm not too concerned about Burfict coming back in terms of Dak Prescott's play, especially if Dez Bryant's playing. I think you plug Dak Prescott in there and say, go at it.
Something I'm actually looking forward to is a little bit of a jawing back and forth between Des Bryant and Vontaze Burfict if that is available to us. I think just because I'm a competitive guy, I like to see if that would happen. But ultimately, I think the game will be good all the way around. But if you have Des Bryant, I think Dak is a little bit easier of a pick. But if you don't have Des Bryant, I think one of these other 3 quarterbacks are a little bit better at your options.
I agree.
That's just personal.
I agree.
So, what about running backs? I mean, you mentioned a couple of them. You talked about Dixon and West. Here's one. How about Orleans Darkwa?
He had a good game.
New York Giants.
Yeah. I think that Darkwa, especially given some of the injuries, we don't know if Rashard Jennings is going to be back.
Correct.
And you know that they want to at least have a running presence. That's the problem, is that Ben McAdoo's offense requires a running back, something to catch the ball, something that can block. Darkwa, bigger than Paul Perkins in that backfield. Even though Paul Perkins had a big play this week, I think Darkwa is the person to own because he's going to get the goal line carries. He's going to have an option to really get some of the catches out of the backfield. And although they played Minnesota this week, they get what I believe is a much easier play here in Green Bay. Now, I know some people want to add Green Bay's defense. I like the Giants against a Green Bay defense whose linebackers continue to struggle with injury.
Absolutely. I mean, Julius Peppers is getting up there in age as well. Clay Matthews is still he's been moving back and forth, whether it be middle linebacker or outside linebacker, or as an end kind of linebacker. But to me, I've been skeptical. There's one guy that I like, and of course we're talking about another Alabama product, and that's HaHa Clinton Dix. He's been a great safety. The only problem is that he hasn't had much help other than the aging linebackers that are out there. The defensive backs haven't been up to par. But there is one wide receiver out there that I'm going to enjoy. I think will have a good day, and that's not Jordy Nelson for the Green Bay Packers, but I think that's going to be Randall Cobb.
I'd have to say that I don't know what the press is on Randall Cobb right now. I am a Jordy Nelson fan. My concern about Cobb is he gets pushed around by some DBs, and I like the DBs. Janoris Jenkins probably going to line up on Cobb for the Giants, which means that I'd like to hear why you're kind of high on Cobb, because for me, Cobb seems like the kind of guy that he's going to come across the middle. Janoris Jenkins is going to be on him, or he's going to get hit by Landon Collins in that safety. Another Alabama product in the secondary.
Well, here's the thing is that Cobb hasn't had one of those breakout times, but Jordy Nelson is actually starting to show the signs of what Jordy Nelson was 2 years ago. So he's showing those signs again. And when Jordy Nelson was getting those kind of signs, that's when Randall Cobb actually was having his career years.
That's fair.
So for me, I think that the problem is that I think Randall Cobb, I agree. I think he's actually been slowed down by a lot of these DBs because they can realize they can jam him on the line and it weakens him. But I think that now that Jordy Nelson is starting to show the signs of being that deep threat again, I think that Randall Cobb will have a good game, and it'll be a week-to-week thing. But against New York, I'm still not 100% sold on that New York Giants defense, even though they've been solid.
And, I think that in terms of pass catchers, if Cobb's out there or if you can trade for Cobb, I think that he's somebody that you can buy low right now. Here's somebody that I think you want to look at this week as a waiver wire ad as well. Sammy Coates for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Antonio Brown, great. Best receiver in football. But you know what that means? That means that they're going to focus on Antonio Brown. And that New York Jets defense, somebody pull them out of the oven. They are burnt to a crisp, giving up 8 yards per attempt. And that means that you put Darrelle Revis on Antonio Brown, good luck. Yeah. So they're going to put Darrelle Revis on the other side. But here's what's been happening to Darrelle Revis. He can't keep up. So if he's over there on the outside against Coates, watch for Coates to get open deep for big touchdowns this week.
Here's the other thing about Sammy Coates is that he's a good player to stash. This is coming from Mark Itleong, our third member. Like I said, he'll be back here hopefully next week. He now has five games of 40 or more yards. So there's somebody there. How about if you have a PPR league? We didn't talk about much between PPR points per reception versus just a regular standard league. Cole Beasley.
Oh, he's huge.
Cole Beasley will be one of those guys that, if Des Bryant is or is not available, I think either way, Cole Beasley will still get you 5, 6, 7 catches. Might not get you a ton of yards, but if he gets you 50, 60 yards and gets you a touchdown or something like that, hey, you got a good day.
Well, and you said with Dak Prescott, if you had Des Bryant really plug him in there, I think if you have Cole Beasley, you plug him in there. He has loved Cole Beasley in that underneath route a lot this year. So Dak Prescott's looking to Beasley, looking in the red zone to Beasley. I think that he's another good option. If you've got Beasley, look for Dak Prescott if you don't have a quarterback.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and take a small break. It is top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and take a small break. We're in the middle of our pick'ems or sit-ems as we kind of get close to that point. So, and we're also looking at the waiver wire. Stay right here. More to come as I can hit the outro. There we go. More to come right here on Fantasy Football Classroom right here on 91.9 FM, the Pacific Tiger Radio Network, and on the 209 Sports YouTube channel. I'm JD Jeff Dominic, along with the Professor, Stephen Farias. We'll be right back.
You're listening to KPAC, Stockton, 91.9.
Right now?
Run it up! Home of the Pacific Tigers.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. But every driver seeks the pinnacle of their achievements. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper cars, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go fish, Dad!
Oh, come on! This is WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of him having 15 career NASCAR victories? 1 in 1.7 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Go Caleb! Come on, hit a homer, Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wow, Jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's true. I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, so obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Driving has a rhythm all its own. Don't wreck it with a text. Before you get behind the wheel, silence your phone. Or better yet, designate a texter. For more text-free driving tips, visit stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
And welcome back to here on Fantasy Football Classroom. I am JD Jeff Dominic, the Professor. Mr. Stephen Farias is here with me as well. Thank you all for tuning in today. We got Hey, I at least said today. I haven't said tonight yet, so we're doing good.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're awake.
We are awake. So thank you all for tuning in today. We're just now past the top of the hour. This is a 2-hour show. We'll be running until just about noon. We will have a rebroadcast on this as well. So if you're listening to our rebroadcast, thank you very much for listening. That will be on Thursdays from 10 a.m. to noon. We'll make sure that we get that all set up for everybody just as a reminder. We were in the middle of our waiver wire, and we were starting to transition to wide receivers, and then we kind of got off base here a little bit, but there were a couple other running backs we wanted to push out there as well that Professor, I know you had some to throw out there.
I think that so this morning, if you aren't paying attention, you don't get the push notifications. Justin Forsett released by the Ravens again, which means that they're running with Terrence West and Kenneth Dixon. Kenneth Dixon, somebody that you probably should have stashed already. He was the best running back for the Ravens in the preseason. I think that Terrence West had a big week last week against the Raiders. You need to look at that backfield going forward. It is a backfield by committee, so you might be kind of scared off by it. But I think Kenneth Dixon and Terrence West, they're both going to be good for 15 touches a week here. And that's a lot of touches when you start considering an offense that doesn't have, I like Steve Smith, so I hope he's not listening because he kind of scares me. But they don't have a number one wide receiver. And so although you might like Steve Smith or you might like Dennis Pitt or you might like somebody like that, that's an offense that's really going to look to run the ball, I think, as we start moving into the second half of the season.
See, and that's what's funny is as a wide receiver, Steve Smith would be one of those guys I look forward to because he's only owned in 9% of fantasy football leagues, and he's not a bad option. He actually had a good game against the Oakland Raiders. He's actually not that, and he's still the old man. If you want to go there, he's still the old.
He ran away from that secondary with that 52-yard catch. He's got speed at 39.
Absolutely. Another wide receiver that I want to make sure everybody's aware of, but I'm kind of leery on him, and I think that he would be a good flex option if you need him, is going to be someone like Robert Woods. He's only owned by 1% of fantasy football owners in the ESPN leagues, and that's not speaking for anything else, but he's only owned by 1%. But the thing is that with Sammy Watkins being out, Clemson product, but with him being out, it's going to make a lot more things open for him. The only problem is you have Tyrod Taylor, who I've not been completely sold on. I think he's a good a good quarterback, but Tyrod Taylor is somebody I'm not 100% on. But you got LaShawn McCoy, who's a good running back in the backfield or catching passes. But to me, I think that Robert Woods is going to be that one guy that you want to look at.
Let me toss two more out to you. One of them from that same division, Quincy Enunwa for the Jets. He is going to be starting in place of Eric Decker. Eric Decker, most reliable fantasy receiver in fantasy football, either 80 yards or a touchdown. I think it's like 16, 17 games now. But the difference between Enunwa and Decker, Enunwa can get tall and go up for those big catches, makes him a red zone target in a way that Eric Decker is not. And I love Eric Decker. I love him as a receiver. But because he's not going to be playing, he's got that shoulder injury. We don't know if he's going to go on IR or not. Pick up Quincy Enunwa if he's still available in your league. Another one, we come back to that Bears offense. I know the Bears defense, I expected Detroit to go off on them, but they didn't. But what that means is a receiver like Eddie Royal, they've got Kevin White, they've got Alshon Jeffrey. A lot of targets so far. But if you got Brian Hoyer starting in that game and not Jay Cutler, which I think is probably likely, Eddie Royal is somebody that you want to look at because Hoyer has historically had an underneath receiver that he's really liked. If you think about his time where he learned how to play quarterback with the Patriots, always have an underneath receiver. If you think about his time with the Texans last year, Hopkins got free on slant routes all the time. I think that's the kind of player that you need to be looking at as an option, Eddie Royal, if you are in a deeper league.
And I know we want to get into tight ends, but there's a couple other things. Now, as far as a new one goes for the New York Jets, owned in 19% of fantasy football leagues, definitely somebody to go after. How about Terrell Pryor?
Oh, TP, I love him.
There's somebody that we haven't really even talked about. And when we talk about Cleveland Browns, we kind of go, Cleveland Browns. And they're having just a horrendous season. They're the only team that hasn't found a win yet, which is surprising to me. I thought Cleveland would be way better than this, especially with Hugh Jackson as the
and they're not going to find it this week. They got the Patriots.
Yeah. Well, and then I think the Patriots are going to come back mean. So,
yeah.
But Terrell Pryor is going to be someone that's going to get you a ton of yards. He's owned in 48% of the league, so that means you have a good, probably a coin flip worth of if he's going to be out on your league. And I think he's somebody that you're going to want to take. He racked up 100-plus yards over the last couple of games. In each of the last couple of games, I think he's going to be someone that you're going to definitely want.
Well, and I see where you're coming from, and I think that you're also underselling how important it could be to have Terrell Pryor. Hugh Jackson's offense, when we start thinking about somebody who comes up with trick plays, I mean, this man put Andy Dalton in the Wildcat. Put him out there, throwback pass, then a throw to A.J. Green one time. So we're looking at an offensive person who puts his players in a position to succeed no matter what that means. That means Terrell Pryor is going to get some throws as a quarterback. I mean, as a Raiders fan, it made me worried when he was our starting quarterback, but if you have him running that Wildcat where he's got the option to run or throw, it's not just his pass catching ability. He's going to get some options in that backfield that you don't want to give to, say, a Cody Kessler or to, say, a Josh McCown. So I like Terrell Pryor a lot, not just for his receiving ability, but for the multiplicity of things that he could provide for you on any given fantasy week.
He's one of those guys that you put on the old school hat again. I'll throw that on there real quick. Is a Cordell Stewart.
Oh yeah, he's a slash for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that he's a better wide receiver than Cordell Stewart, which means I think Cordell Stewart was a better quarterback.
Oh yeah.
But I think that you put on that cap, and that's who you were, who you're looking at. Same thing, essentially like a Hines Ward, who was a former quarterback.
Cordell Stewart also a better punter than Terrell Pryor. I put out there, just throwing it out there. People
then
again,
I don't think he's going to affect the fantasy numbers in
No,
the punt rate.
unfortunately.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm going to say that Terrell Pryor may be that guy that you're going to want to also. I think out of all the wide receivers we kind of put out there, Terrell Pryor might be that guy that you want to go for. I think Enunwan is probably about a close second.
Mhm.
And then you throw Steve Smith. I think you can't ever go wrong with the crafty veteran, the old guy, quote unquote. But I think he's way better than just an old guy. I think he's not filling up space. He's doing a great job in possibly his final year as a Baltimore Raven and in the NFL.
Yeah. I think that we, with these pass catchers in mind, we've still got to start talking about some of the tight ends that you might be able to get. And I think one of the ones that I'm looking at this week, although the obvious is still Tyler Eifert, if he's out there, add him quick.
Yeah.
He's going to make that Bengals defense excellent. But I think my number one ad,
If he's healthy.
right? But even still, you stash him if you don't have Travis Kelce or you don't have, say, like a Kobe Fleener because they're on bye weeks. If you can stash Eifert, I would still stash him. It gives you an opportunity to really put yourself in a position to trade when Rob Gronkowski potentially gets hurt again or something like that. Tight end is an undervalued position, but I think you can get some value out of it. One of the people I'm looking at, Hunter Henry. That Raiders defense is atrocious when it comes to covering tight ends. They don't have a linebacker that can do it. Malcolm Smith has a groin injury. That's insider knowledge because as a Raider fan, I know what's happening. He's got a groin injury. Ben Heaney going to be out for the season. That means that this week, Hunter Henry, owned in 3.1% of ESPN leagues, gives you an opportunity really for more than just a touchdown. But we're looking at probably like 6 to 8 catches, 60 yards. That's the kind of tight end he can be, a natural pass catcher, fast, outrun the defense. I like Hunter Henry a lot this week against the Raiders.
As you mentioned, Hunter Henry, he's caught 9 passes into 12 targets, 163 yards, and a touchdown. He's definitely going to be looking to be that new bright spot with the Antonio Gates one. He's just losing a step. I mean, I like Antonio Gates. He's always been the old reliable for me whenever I was playing when I'm playing fantasy football. But Hunter Henry, I think you've nailed it right on the head. I think he's a good, viable option in order for him. But also, Richard Rodgers, I think he's very underrated, that being the tight end for Green Bay Packers. Very underrated. I think a lot of people saw Jared Cook being in there and was going to be that new pass-catching wide receiver, the guy that they were looking for to still take the place of Sterling Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Richard Rodgers, I think, still is that viable option that people still don't realize. He's owned in 7.5% of the ESPN fantasy football leagues, 8% overall. If you need a tight end, and I'm just kind of saying that if a lot of your tight ends are, you have just regular pass catching tight ends, which like Jason Witten, you just don't know what you're going to get from week to week. And I like Jason Witten. I think he's always been that old. He's now my biggest old reliable now. But I think Rich Rodgers can be that other guy.
I definitely agree with Rodgers. You also just a couple of other names I'm going to throw out there. Jacob Tamme, he could have a big week against Denver. You could also get somebody like Ryan Griffin for Houston. He could have a big week against Minnesota. We're looking at some pass catchers that you might not be thinking about, but you might have a buy. Like we said, we have Kobe Fleener, we have Travis Kelce, you have Jimmy Graham, you have Julius Thomas, OJ there on the on buy, which means that you might be looking for a tight end. And I think that these are a few of the lesser known tight ends that you might be able to pick up. Last one I'll give you, Cameron Brate for Tampa Bay. Cameron Brate playing against that Carolina defense. I already told you their secondary is awful. Brate is the tight end to own in that offense, and he's going to get some red zone targets.
So real quick, couple stats like Cameron Brate. He's 10 catches, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns on 18 targets. He's going to be that guy that you look for in the red zone. So you're going to want to have to go after him. Same thing, as you mentioned, Jacob Tamme, 16 catches, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 22 targets.
Yeah.
Another guy that's
efficient.
He draws, was per Mark Itliong. Once again, He'll be our third guy as he comes in here. He draws matchups against the Broncos and the Seahawks in the next 2 weeks. So, it's like, well, do you want to buy on him or do you want? I'd much rather, if it were me and you give me these four, I'm going to give you four options, and that being Cameron Brake, Hunter Henry, and Jacob Tamme. I said four, I meant three. I think I'm going to go with. I think I'm going with Cameron Brake, and that's just because I think the Tampa Bay versus Carolina matchup, division. Can't go wrong there. I think it's just going to be one of those fun things. I think I'd go Hunter Henry next. He'd be my close second.
Okay.
So that's just my opinion. Is there anybody else that we may be looking at before we go into the matchups of the week?
I think defense-wise, I think we got to get a defense out there. If you got a defense that you need to play, because again, you got the Seahawks on bye, you got the Chiefs on bye, you're probably playing those defenses. Look to the Buffalo Bills this week. They're playing a very good matchup in the Los Angeles Rams. I know they're 3-1. LA, don't get mad at me, but your offense is not good. Todd Gurley not playing well. Buffalo coming off a big win. They might have a small letdown, but I like them, and I like them moving forward and looking ahead. Remember that sometimes you got to add a defense ahead of time, so prospective defensive ads, really a great idea. If you look ahead, the Bills have the 49ers at home on deck in Week 6. Makes them a good ad now and for the second week following.
Here's mine, and I'm going to say the Baltimore Ravens. They're going up against the Washington Redskins. Now, keep in mind, they did give up. They only got 1 point last week against the Oakland Raiders. That's tough. But keep in mind, they're going up against the Washington Redskins that just came off of a barely win against the Cleveland Browns. A Cleveland Browns team that sacked Kirk Cousins 3 times.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say you got Terrell Suggs. You got guys that over there that are Jimmy Smith as a DB is great. I think he's going to be a
They're getting Doomerville back.
Doomerville coming back. I mean, guys like that are not somebody that you want to sleep on. And I think with the Baltimore Ravens owning 17.8% of fantasy football leagues, 20% overall, Baltimore Ravens are still a solid defense. And I think the Coach Harbaugh has a great team there. I think 3-1. A lot of people say that this team is a horrible 3-1 team. Offensively, maybe. I mean, I think they're going to be a hit or miss team week to week. But I think defensively they're going to be solid throughout the season.
I agree. I think the Baltimore's a great pickup on defense this week.
So let's go ahead and start talking about the matchups of the week and see who to sit or who should we start if you have these players available to you. And of course, why not start with the first matchup, that being on Thursday. So luckily we're going to be rebroadcasting this Thursday morning. So if you're looking at somebody like, oh crud, I need to set my lineup, listen to us and hopefully we get you some good stuff.
And here's something I'll tell you, a piece of information you might not hear on a lot of other fantasy shows, but I think it's really important. You should look at the Vegas odds if you're playing fantasy. Vegas, just learn this line. Vegas knows more than I do. Vegas knows more than I do. They need to know more than I do because they actually make money off of playing football and making bets on football. So when you look at the fantasy week and think about matchups, look at the over-under. Over-under for Thursday night's game is 43 points. That means that you've got Arizona projected pretty much to win 24-20 against San Francisco, maybe 24-17, something like that. So when you start thinking about that, I think you really want to start a Drew Stanton. We're talking about a Niners defense that's coming off of losing its leader in Navarro Bowman. They don't have a great secondary. And you're talking about an Arizona Cardinals team who just got embarrassed by the Rams. Bruce Arians doesn't like being embarrassed. Called Jeff Fisher out a year and a half ago. Jeff Fisher made some big comments in the media after the game. I like Arizona's passing game. So start John Brown, start Michael Floyd, start Drew Stanton. I know I'm saying start Drew Stanton. Start Drew Stanton and start David Johnson.
And once again, that's if you need them. I mean, and see, there's one guy you didn't mention, and well, actually two, but I'm going to throw this guy out here because he's a veteran, and I'm good with the veterans. Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Drew Stanton's going to look for him. I think he's just that safety valve that everybody needs. That Larry Fitzgerald is going to get you. I think, in my prediction, he's going to get you about 6-7 catches. May not get you a ton of yards. So let's say he'll get you about 50 yards, and he may get you a touchdown.
And I like Larry Fitzgerald. I just like their passing game against the Niners. A Niner to start, and I think this is important too because I think it will help the passing game. Start Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde still playing well, loves that Chip Kelly offense. He's getting holes to run in. But what this means is that when you are looking for possession receivers, because I think the Cardinals are going to be ahead looking to move the chains, get first downs. Larry Fitzgerald, pretty good. But in order to have that, you need to have an offense that can produce points. And I think the Niners can still produce points. So look for some Niners players. I think Carlos Hyde is a player you want to start. If you're looking for somebody to stash, you got the space, Stash Colin Kaepernick. I know I said it. Stash Colin Kaepernick. I think he's going to start seeing some playing time. Blaine Gabbert, 32nd out of 34 quarterbacks, statistically, according to Pro Football Focus, not going to continue to start for the Niners.
It's funny you said that because here's another guy that I'm going to say start, and this one's a no-brainer because it's just you drafted him high. That's going to be David Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be that guy that you're going to want to start because as you just mentioned, he was talking about you're talking about moving the chains, staying ahead. Well, if they are ahead, they're going to play Johnson left and right. I mean, he's going to go up the middle, left or right. He's going to go off tackle. I mean, the guy's and he's a beast, and I think he's going to wear down that San Francisco defense, and it's just going to make it easier for them to stay ahead.
It's definitely a get-well game for David Johnson. Hasn't played poorly, but could really get well this week against the 49ers on a Thursday game.
It's a way to pick. You're going to be picking on a team that's just, I mean, they're going to be the unfortunately, without Navarro Bowman there, I mean, they're just going to be picked on left and right because you don't have that presence.
And you've got Armstead still dealing with injuries on that defense. I like the defense when they're healthy, but I feel bad for Niner fans because I don't think that's going to be very much this year.
Let's go ahead and take a small break. We got the morning slate of games. Well, if you're on the West Coast, it's the morning slate of games. If you're on the East Coast, it's the early afternoon games. So let's go ahead and take a small break. When we come back, we're going to have more to come right here on Fantasy Football Focus, or Fantasy Football Classroom. You said Focus, that's what threw me off. I am JD Jeff Dominic. That is the Professor, Stephen Farias. And we'll be right back here on 91.9 FM, the Pacific Tiger Radio Network, and on 209 Sports, the 209 Sports YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. Take one.
Behold the angry giant.
Try it again, Alberto.
Behold the angry giant.
Perfect. Good luck tonight.
Behold the angry giant.
Yay! Read me another one, Dad.
This is WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
So when you get to the corner of Smith and Orchard, you're going to want to take a left.
You are not going to
then
believe
what you're
this.
going to do is turn
Marcy
onto Marcy
and Brad
Avenue
just broke up,
and go past
and
the
apparently
first
she's
3 lights,
happy
and then
about
take
it.
the next left.
I don't really
Then
think
drive
she's
5 more
happy,
blocks,
but
and you should be
who am
there.
I to judge, right?
Park
anyway,
on the right.
That's
I'll
what
see
I
you
heard
later
last
tonight.
night.
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
So, I'm a dog, and I'm kind of new to this family, but I've noticed a trend. My humans do this thing where they go around and get all my toys and hide them in this basket, but it's always the same basket, and it's always the same place, and then they act so surprised when I find them, but I'm like, hello, that's where you put it last time. Humans are the worst at hide and go seek.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
This message is for all of you sitting in the passenger seat. And apologies if it gets a little uncomfortable, but how does it feel to be at the mercy of someone who thinks a random text is more important than your life? Someone who takes their eyes off the road while speeding along in a 3-ton hunk of steel. Freaky, right? Well, why not just ask them to stop? Or better yet, volunteer to text for them. It might be a little awkward, but believe me, you'll live.
Learn more at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
I know more about cooking dinner for a party of 12 than about packing a lunch for a 12-year-old. I know kids like things like fish sticks. Fillets, I get, but sticks? Maybe we can just compromise on mac and cheese. Can you make that with Brie?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit AdoptUsKids.org for more information. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese.
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Fantasy Football Classroom here on 91.9 FM. And on the 209 Sports YouTube channel. The Pacific Tiger Radio Network is 91.9 FM. Make sure we get those call letters correct. Thank you all for tuning in today. I am JD Jeff Dominic. Alongside with me, the professor, Mr. Stephen Farias. We're talking about matchups now. I mean, if you've missed the first part of the show, you've missed a lot of information. Once again, this will be rebroadcasting on Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon. So we will get you everything that you need to make sure that you are up to date before the Thursday night games. We already went over to the Thursday night game of who we liked, who we don't like. A lot of them are San Francisco 49ers, but at the same time, you did have one, that being Carlos Hyde. I had, for the Arizona Cardinals, somebody that I liked, which was Larry Fitzgerald. I think those are two viable options if you needed them. Carlos Hyde, he's definitely your number two running back. If you have that option, I think he'd be a number two running back. Larry Fitzgerald, he's going to be more of your flex, but I think he's a solid flex all the way through. But we are now moving on. The next game I have, and I'm hoping that you're right there with it, is Patriots versus Browns. And what can you say? I mean, I know we talked about one guy that we really like for the Browns, but should we just put the whole Patriots team on there?
I mean, the over-under is 47, which tells you it's actually one of the higher over-unders total for the week, which means that there's going to be a lot of points scored, at least according to Vegas. And although the Patriots are favored by 7.5, I think they really want you to take the Browns with that 7.5. What that means is Patriots are going to put up a ton of points. And so I like everybody on the Patriots defense. Let me give you two people I really like. That Browns defense giving up a lot of rushing yards. We just watched Matt Jones have the best game of the season for him this week, and I don't think that's going to change. So while I like Tom Brady coming back, Tom's angry Tom. I like Edelman. I like Gronkowski playing in this game. I love LeGarrette Blount, and I actually think James White is a flex play this week for that matchup.
As much as you say that the running game, I think you're dead on. I think there's no way, but I think that Tom Brady is going to want to throw that ball 50 times.
Oh, I think so too, but I think that's why Belichick's going to be like, all right, Tom, let's ease it back in and remember that offense. Although Josh McDaniels loves to give his players what he wants. We're talking about a man who let Tebow do whatever he wanted. So
you brought this up though. I mean, the New England Patriots were waiting for the whole gang to get back together and waiting for everybody to show back up. Well, now you got your main cog in the wheel, if you will, and that being Tom Brady. He's 4 games out. He's going to be hungry, and I think he's going to want to get those numbers. And I think he's, even though it's a team aspect, I think he's still going to want to get those numbers. And I think that Rob Gronkowski is going to have a huge game. But I think that the emergence of Martellus Bennett over the last couple of weeks in that system is only going to keep growing now that they have Tom Brady.
And I think that look, I'm saying start Tom Brady. You should start Tom Brady. There's not a reason you shouldn't. You drafted him for a reason so that he would start week 5. So start Tom Brady. I'm just saying that if we're looking for, maybe it's a daily fantasy league, or maybe you're looking for somebody that you got to pick up or play in this matchup, I like the New England running backs. I think everyone's startable. I actually think that New England wins by at least 10 points in this matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that 7 number really is a play on trying to get everyone to kind of go after
Take
Cleveland.
the under.
I would go New England. I think New England is going to be one. I'm going to think that they're going to be 100% just irritated and want to just throw it down someone's throat. And I think Cleveland Browns is going to be the unfortunate punching bag.
35 plus points this week. 35 plus points is what I'm predicting for the Patriots.
I'm going to say that. I think it may even go more. I'm going to say more than 40. So, I mean, I just think that they're going to play angry.
Yeah.
And I think Cleveland Browns, if you're going to go after anybody, the thing is, though, I like a lot of players on the Cleveland Browns. I like Duke Johnson. I like, the running back slips my mind, but Terrell Pryor, Isaiah Crowell, and then Terrell Pryor. I think those 3 guys are good players to start.
And there's no reason, remember, the Jaguars got you tons of garbage points last year. Garbage time is beautiful time for fantasy players. Put Crowell in, put Terrell Pryor in. I'm nervous about Duke Johnson because New England covers players out of the backfield, and if we're looking at what the weather looks like in that game, we're looking at 54, mostly cloudy. That means that there's a potential for big winds in Cleveland, maybe some precipitation. So I'm kind of nervous about a player like Duke Johnson, but still, I like the idea of playing your Cleveland Browns as well because they'll get some garbage time points.
Absolutely. So I think that there's a lot of. I think if you're going to look at anything, Terrell Pryor may be a flex option. Wouldn't put him as your wide receiver 1 or 2. I think you put him as a flex. If you're with the Patriots, Deion Lewis or somebody like that, or James White, if healthy, I should put that out there because make sure you keep an eye on the injury reports. Then again, on Coach Belichick's injury report, everybody's questionable.
Everybody's questionable.
Yeah, so I think Tom Brady will be as well, and he hasn't even played a game yet. He just came back from Italy. Come on now. But anyways, but I think that those guys are flex options. Julian Edelman, I think, is a good flex. Your tight ends, I think, are
Start 'em.
Martellus Bennett or Rob Gronkowski. I think either one's going to be just fine for you. Gronkowski didn't have much last week, but I think but Martellus Bennett did. He had over 100 yards. I just think that even though they got shut out, he still had 100 yards. So huge game, I think, coming for the Patriots. I think everyone's going to be very satisfied with if you play pretty much anybody on the Patriots team. Eagles, Lions.
Again, I think we talked about Carson Wentz in our waiver wire pickup. Again, Wendell Smallwood. I love this matchup. I like the Eagles over under here 46. So very similar to that Patriots Cleveland game, except there's not one team that's going to blow them out. So I like starting Wendell Smallwood against this Lions defense. For the Lions, I really think you got to put Marvin Jones back up in that wide receiver 1 category. I don't think Matthew Stafford's going to have a fantastic day, but I think that his receiver, Marvin Jones Jr., going to have a strong day against a secondary that I think is prone for big plays.
The thing is, though, I look at it like this. What did they do against Pittsburgh? They only allowed 3 points, that being the Eagles. They only allowed 3 points. And that, I think that obviously Pittsburgh is way better than Detroit Lions. And they were only able to muster 3 points against that Philadelphia defense. So to me, Marvin Jones, maybe not so much. I mean, and that's just.
Antonio Brown still had a good day that week, though. That's where I'm looking at it, and you go, look, I know it may not be a world beater. It's not a Julio Jones type week. I'll give you that. But I like if you got to start a line, I don't think Golden Tate's the person you start against that defense. I don't think Ebron's the person you start against that defense. Remember, they've got some good interior linebackers. So I think that what you really want to do is you want to focus on who do you start against that defense. Let's start Marvin Jones. I mean, maybe you got somebody else for me on that offense that you want to start against the Eagles defense.
No, absolutely not. I'm actually staying away from the Lions. I really am. I mean, but then again, I also look at it like this. When I had Julio Jones, and I looked at it like this, is that if put Marvin Jones in that category of Julio Jones. And the reason why I say it like that, not because of the player that both of them are. I think Julio Jones way exceeds Marvin Jones. But the thing is that I looked at it like this. Julio Jones was going against the Carolina Panthers defense that everyone thought was going to be really, really good. I questioned on whether or not I wanted to even put Julio Jones in because I thought he was going to do something where he was going to have an okay day. But you know what? He was my best option. So there was no way that I wasn't going to play him. Marvin Jones in a lot of leagues is probably one of your best options. So yes, I agree with you. I don't like that option, but
that's fair.
If he's one of your best options, you're going to have to play him.
I mean, like I said, I like him in this matchup. He's the only line I like in this matchup.
Absolutely. Running game, no. Matthew Stafford, no. Golden Tate, no. I mean, Ebron, you said no. Let's go on the Philadelphia side. Defense, I think I'm starting.
Yeah.
Jordan Matthews, I think I'm starting.
Darius Slay's pretty good for that DBs, and so I like Jordan Matthews because of the matchups that they can try and exploit, because I think what Doug Peterson will do is he'll get him in a position like a Jeremy Maclin was in Kansas City. Remember, Doug Peterson comes from that Kansas City offense,
right?
So that means that number one receiver always going to get open. I think a sleeper play, I like Jordan Matthews as well. Zach Ertz. Coming back off an injury, you got him as a tight end, and he's like a Travis Kelce. Doug Peterson, again, Andy Reid knows how to use their tight end.
So this is our first show together, and yet I'm already scared because you're reading a lot of the stuff that, and it's not on my screen. You're not reading it off my screen or anything. But Zach Ertz was that guy that I'm thinking of, because I think Zach Ertz was that pass catching tight end that they missed, even though that the team is phenomenal right now. I think that you add an extra weapon for Carson Wentz, that release valve. And he's going to be that guy. I think he's going to get you 5-6 catches. Actually, I'll go a little less. I'll say 4 to 5 catches. But I think Zach Ertz is a great viable option.
One, especially as we're talking about pass catchers, that means you got to fade a Darren Sproles. I think Wendell Smallwood, again, I'm telling you, I'm bullish on this guy. You got to pick him up. But if he's getting the running game and Ryan Matthews is still injured, and we talk about Zach Ertz, Sproles not going to get as many catches out of the backfield. So for you Sproles owners people out there who have him in a PPR league, I'm not saying he's an awful play, but I'd fade him a little bit.
Let's move on to but back up real quick. Carson Wentz. Are you going all in? I mean, we talked about this at to a point earlier in the show. Are we at the point where we're ready for him to keep starting him, or are we saying let's hold off, let's see what we got, and if I have a better quarterback, I'd much rather have him.
I think that you got okay. So I know that there's some worry about him as a rookie quarterback, but let's just look at it. He's got I love Doug Peterson, been with Andy Reid, quarterback in the NFL. He's got Chase Daniels, who helps him understand that system. I think Carson Wentz is an every week starter, and the reason I say that is we doubted Andrew Luck when he first came out. We doubted Cam Newton. Heck, you might have doubted Derek Carr. All of them finished in the top 15 to 20 of quarterbacks. And unless you've got a Drew Brees, unless you've got a Tom Brady, you've really got to be starting somebody that you think is going to finish in that second tier. I think Carson Wentz could easily finish in that second tier. No, he's not going to be Ben Roethlisberger. No, he's not going to be a world beater. But if you're expecting 200 yards and 2 touchdowns every week from your quarterback, I think he's going to get you there.
And of course, a little bit of rushing aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's going to get you the 30 yards rushing. He's going to get you 200 yards passing. As you mentioned, 2 touchdowns, this, that, and the other thing. He's not going to give you, and I use this term quite often, is he's not going to get you the sexy numbers.
Right.
He's not going to get you the beautiful, oh my gosh, he just threw for 500 yards. Shout out to Matt Ryan, who just had a great day. But he's going to get you consistency, and that's what I think a lot of people need.
And let's not forget, Kirk Cousins was a viable fantasy starter last year. And I'm not a Kirk Cousins fan. I don't think he's that great of a quarterback. But if you're looking at me, if I had to pick in that division, look at those quarterbacks, I'm taking Carson Wentz as the second best quarterback to Eli Manning in that division.
Wow, I like it. Let's move on to where am I at? Bears and Colts. Bears versus Colts at the Colts. Bears. You could go a lot of different directions in this, actually, quite honestly.
I love Jordan Howard in this matchup. Colts defense, also an atrocious defense, over under 47.5. So again, all these early games, we're looking at some not explosive points, but some dependable points. And I like Jordan Howard against that Colts defense. I also, like I said, I think that Brian Hoyer is a contrarian play in daily fantasy. I think that Brian Hoyer is a play if you got to fill him in. So I like him in this matchup. The Colts, it scares me because I think Andrew Luck is really getting beat up. I don't know who to start for the Colts.
I got one for you, and as if you've seen the theme of this team or of this show, I'm going for veterans. Give it to Frank Gore. He's been doing good over the last few this season so far. He's already at roughly about 325 yards rushing. He's got a couple touchdowns. He's been very solid. I think if you have a better running back option, obviously go with it. But if you need a running back too, or even to use him as a flex option, he's your good option. I mean, out of everybody on that Indianapolis team, I think if you go with Frank Gore, you're not wrong. The other one I'm going to say is T.Y. Hilton, but I'm wishy-washy on it. And when I say that is because I don't know which T.Y. Hilton I'm going to get. I could get the one that breaks out for 155 yards, and especially going against the Bears defense, that's very possible. So maybe I'm going to go look at T.Y. Hilton as.
But you also know what Bears defense you're going to get. Remember, this is the same defense that stifled a much better offense in Detroit last week in a dome as well. So that's what I think that I don't think that the Bears defense is going to give you a lot of points, but I think they're going to be able to really focus in on some of the pass catchers. I like the Frank Gore play. They don't have a 100-yard rusher, and I think like 17 games in Indianapolis, so you need a 100-yard rusher, I think, to start getting this offense back on balance. I hope that they start doing it. I just don't have a lot of faith in the leadership of the Colts. You got Andrew Luck, and somehow you can't even figure out how to draft the right lineman, get him protected, get a running game going. And so it makes me nervous to start anybody for Indianapolis.
Let's move over on to the Bears. Alshon Jeffrey, where are you at? You got to come out. Now it's time. It's time. Kevin White, I understand you were hurt last year. It's time for you two to come through. But I'm not sold on these guys. But you know who I'm going to look for? Zach Miller.
Yeah, I like Zach Miller. And again, in our pickups, I said Eddie Royal, Zach Miller, another good person for Brian Hoyer.
The tight end.
The tight end. Zach Miller going to get some targets. Look, Kevin White got a ton of targets the first 2 weeks. Couldn't do anything with him.
Right.
Alshon Jeffrey, targets last week. Couldn't do anything with him. It's disappointing, I think, but I think it's what you need to come to expect from the Bears offense at this point. Once they lost Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, he's going to have big games. He's going to have bad games. So look for those middle of the road players like an Zach Miller I like a lot too, because he's in the middle of the field. He's going to get passes thrown to him from Brian Hoyer, and Hoyer ain't going to look to throw the ball down the field to Kevin White like Jay Cutler did.
Absolutely. Now, as we move on, once again, this is the morning slate of games if you're on the West Coast, the early afternoon games if you're on the East Coast, or the somewhere in between if you're in the Central area. But Titans-Dolphins, I'm interested in this matchup because there's a lot of good things there, fantasy-wise. Titans' defense, I think, is going to be good, but I think you look at the Dolphins' offense, and there's a lot of good things over there, too.
Second lowest point total, over under 44 points for the morning slate. I like the idea of Marcus Mariota. We mentioned him earlier for the Titans. I think that he'll get the running game going. DeMarco Murray, get the running game going. They will get some points there. And so I like the Titans a lot in this matchup, just as an ability to kind of control the clock and really score some points. If you're looking at Miami, can you trust Ryan Tannehill? I don't think you can. They might get one big play. I think what you really need to be looking at, Jay Ajayi. Now, Ajayi, not as well known, or he might be available out there on the waiver wire, but I like Jay Ajayi to be catching balls out of the backfield. That's something that the Raiders did against this Tennessee defense, got their running backs going, which enabled them to get some good passes down the field. So I like that kind of matchup there with some pass catchers out of the backfield. And again, I said I don't like Ryan Tannehill, but if you needed a pass catcher, you might want to start Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker, another one of those big receivers that plays well against the Tennessee Titans. I just think that you want to focus on the Titans and less on the Dolphins in this matchup.
Parker's more of a slot wide receiver, somebody that if you like a lot of the slot wide receivers, a lot of people do because they get a lot of targets their way. Jarvis Landry is one of the best in the league. And he gets you the most consistent plays. He's going to be one guy. Jordan Cameron, I kind of been wondering where he's been at, the tight end for the Miami Dolphins. But if we're going to look at tight end wise in this matchup, you're going to obviously start Delaney Walker.
Yeah, and Delaney Walker,
healthy wise,
health permitting, but Delaney Walker, a lot bigger, a lot faster. Jordan Cameron, I guess I don't know where to go with this Miami Dolphins offense. They've got weapons. That's not the question. The question is, do they have a coaching staff that can get them there? They got Adam Gase. I thought it'd be much better than it really is. I think the problem I have is Ryan Tannehill. He's not consistent. He hasn't grown since really that first couple years, and now we're starting to see that type of regression.
And a lot of people were really high on Miami, including myself, when they played against Seattle. Looked really good. Mm-hmm. I was very impressed, and then it just seems like one dud after another, and I was just, of course you played New England and all these other teams, and it's kind of like, okay, well maybe not as good as I thought you were.
And let's remember, in that game it was a 12-10 game, something like that. So it's not like they put up fantasy numbers. No. They played well. But that might be more of a function of Seahawks playing poorly in that matchup, which kind of kept them in the game.
Another intriguing matchup: Redskins versus Ravens. It's in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got a wide receiver. We talked about that being Steve Smith. I think he's going to have fun against. I'm going to be interested to see him going against Josh Norman and seeing how that kind of jaw-jacking back and forth will be. Redskins, a lot of offensive weapons. I think Redskins are going to be great offensively. I think they're going to do just fine. I should say. I won't say great, but I think that the Baltimore defense is going to be a stout defense to go up against.
I think that the Baltimore defense at home, key part at home, I think they'll be good. And I think that I like Washington's playmakers. So if you can get Matt Jones out there, if you can get Jordan Reed, we talked about, I think that both those players are startable. I'm looking to the outside. If Deshaun Jackson, if he's healthy enough to go, if he's playing well, he's not questionable, so he's been healthy. But again, he finds small injuries to not play. So I like the running back, tight end for Washington. For Baltimore, Kenneth Dixon's first game of the season, Terrence West, I think they're going to get back to running the ball. And let's remember, Josh Norman stays on one side of the field most of the time in this defense.
Yep.
That means that while he manned up against Odell Beckham, they're not going to put him manned up against Steve Smith or Mike Wallace for that matter. So look for the pass catchers of the Ravens to have a big day against the secondary that moves away from Josh Norman, throws it away from him, doesn't throw to his side.
Mike Wallace is a very underrated wide receiver in this offense. I think he's going to have a decent day. Look for him to be close to 100 yards this week.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Smith, likewise, I think he'll do the regular Steve Smith stuff. He'll be great if he's a PPR league. As far as Washington, you mentioned Deshaun Jackson, former Cal player. Got to still give him a little love, but at the same time, I see him always do this, and that's why I'm always so leery of one, either starting him or even having him on my team. 1 week, he'll score 18 points.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, one.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. I got to have some consistency in my lineups, and that's one thing I'm really, really huge on. And if I had my option, I wouldn't even have him as a flex.
No, I mean, and he needs to beat coverage, and he needs Kirk Cousins to get him the ball when he beats coverage. Those are two things that just don't consistently happen.
So I mean, I think that I think this will be a good matchup. I think it'll be fun. I would love to see Steve Smith go up against Josh Norman, just because both of them are relentless. I think it's just fun. It's just me being the competitive guy that I am. I would much rather see that. Here's one that if you love your defenses, this may be it. Texans Vikings.
Texans Vikings lowest point total of the week, which means that I am not starting almost anyone in this matchup unless it's a defense. I know that Jerick McKinnon, he's pretty decent, but here's the thing that people don't know about the Giants, about the Giants defense that they did. He played well against the Giants defense this week on Monday night, but the Giants defense historically been really good against running backs. You know who's been even better? The Houston Texans. Houston Texans have been holding their running backs to low points. You look at this, what happened last week. I think it's an anomaly. What happened with DeMarco Murray? It's because they were kind of in a shootout. So what I'm really looking at is Texans to contain Jerick McKinnon, Texans to contain Cordero Patterson, which means there's not a ton to start there. If you want, I mean, you got to start Odell Beckham. You can't not start him, but I still think that if there was a player to start for, I'm messed up on my matchups. I don't even know what I'm talking about here.
Texans Vikings.
Texans Vikings.
Yeah.
If you got to start a wide receiver, look. DeAndre Hopkins is the one I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about a number one wide receiver that you got to start, but I don't have a lot of confidence in him against this defense because of what happened to Odell Beckham this week and what happened on Monday night. Same thing with Will Fuller. Will Fuller, I like him a lot, but again in this matchup, the Vikings defense is stout. The Houston defense is stout. I like Minnesota Vikings more than I like your Houston Texans, but again, I don't trust either. I think it's a 2019 game at best.
And you mentioned it. The Texans, and I was going to talk about Will Fuller here real quick. Will Fuller has played up against some good defense. He played last week against Tennessee. Tennessee's a good defense. The thing is, I don't think he's ever been this physically matched up this season like he will against the Vikings. So I like Will Fuller. I've been pushing him the show. This one, not today.
Nope.
And so that's where I'm kind of at with it. I think defenses are going to run amok. I think. We're not high on Brock Osweiler. I'm actually if I was to start a quarterback, I think, quite honestly, I'd pick Sam Bradford. I think he's played very effectively. I'm not high on any of the wide receivers. If you had one, Stephon Diggs, who's a good wide receiver.
PPR definitely.
Definitely. Tight end wise, nobody really there that scares me. So I think you have very few options. If you're gonna go with Stephon Diggs, he's gonna be your flex. If you had a running back that you had to choose, I would actually take the Lamar Miller. I think he's a better running back option. That being for the Texans, but that's kind of about as far as I'd even go.
I mean, and if you're starting Lamar Miller, you're hoping for a big play like Paul Perkins got at the end of the game because that defensive front is 300-pound linemen across the board.
Let's move on as we gotta skim a couple of them.
Okay.
Jets Steelers. Anybody huge right now? I mean,
start all your Steelers.
Exactly.
Let's start every pass catcher.
Le'Veon Bell is
going
to be completely nasty. He was nasty last week, or in the win against Kansas City. I think he's going to be great again. Jets, Marshall. You got to have Brandon Marshall there.
Start him. Anunwa, start him.
You liked him. I think you can start him. But I also think that be careful with the Jets. I think that you may. I think it'll be a gunslinging battle. The thing is that I like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I did last year, but at the same time, he'll throw you a lot of picks, and I think it'll be a shootout, and I think that'll just put you in big time trouble, and I think it'll hurt you.
Feel more confident if Matt Forte starts. Ryan Fitzpatrick, when he's had Forte, played well. Forte gets injured. He hasn't been playing as well. Throws 9 picks so far. So I think that if Matt Forte, who's questionable right now, plays, you start your Jets with confidence. If not, you might want to consider not even really rolling with the Jets.
We're now getting into the late afternoon games. Falcons, Broncos. We talked about Matt Ryan. We talked about Julio Jones. But that was against Carolina. And against the Carolina team that we thought was going to be really good, well, we know the Broncos defense is really good. So you have to start Julio Jones. Do you have to start Matt Ryan?
I don't think so. I think that, and I know that you have to start Julio Jones. It's a must start. You can't not, especially after 300 yards. You're not going to be the person who does it. But if you sit him, and you're right about it, you can go tell the world that you are the king of fantasy for 2 weeks because of the way that Denver's secondary is bar none historically great. I mean, this defense is getting after the pass rusher. They've got Miller. They've got some good inside rushers. And remember, this is all done without DeMarcus Ware. They've got Chris Harris on the outside. I love that defense. And as a Raider fan, it pains me to say that. But fantasy-wise, you look at that defense, I'm not starting Matt Ryan. He's due for some regression, and I think that Julio Jones, you might not start either. Again, I know that you can't do it. I know that if he goes off and you do it, then you're the laughing stock. But really, I think you got a question. If you got two good wide receivers, I told you that scenario I had with somebody who asked me last week. If I had Antonio Brown, Marvin Jones, and Julio Jones this week, I'm still starting Antonio Brown and Marvin Jones. Much better matchup.
Absolutely. Now, a little bit on the running game. You got to talk about Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman. It's one of those things. If you have them and they're your only running back options, start one of them. I mean, it's hard to say that for the Falcons, but I think the Broncos are nasty against the running game. They're nasty against the passing game. I just think the defense is good. But on the offensive side of the ball, regardless of who plays quarterback this week, I kind of like Demaryius Thomas. He's starting to show up, gosh, all of a sudden that other name slipped my mind, but the other wide
Emmanuel
receiver,
Sanders.
Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah. He's actually one of the people I would play guaranteed this week. So Simeon's probable, so he might start. If he doesn't, I'm even more happy to start Paxton Lynch. The naked bootlegs that they're going to run in that offense with Paxton Lynch are going to be filthy. Remember, Gary Kubiak wanted to do this with Peyton Manning. Unfortunately, Peyton Manning can't run. So if you start looking at the quarterbacks they have now, last year they had historically awful quarterback play. Now they have mediocre to upside potential quarterback play. I think that offense gets better, and I like Emmanuel Sanders. Also, don't be afraid to start C.J. Anderson. The Falcons' defense is atrocious against the run. They did a good job containing Carolina this week, but that's because they had Carolina boat raced before Carolina could get their running game started, and Cam Newton decided to waltz into the end zone and get himself a concussion. So I think that what you're really looking at is Gary Kubiak's going to go back to his zone run. He's going to start gashing them, and this is a defense that gave up big running plays to the Raiders, gave up big running plays to the Saints. You look for this defense to give up big running plays to C.J. Anderson. You start C.J. Anderson with confidence this week.
Bengals at Cowboys. I think that there's a lot of question marks here. I think a lot of it revolves around, is Dez Bryant going to be healthy for the Cowboys? I think Ezekiel Elliott will be a viable option, but he would be a running back too. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to be your best running back option because I think against that Bengals defense, it'll be tougher. I think Vontaze Burfict will be able to clog that middle a lot better than what they've had in the last few games. Of course, he came back last week, but I think that he's going to be a better option there. Bengals, I don't know how you feel about AJ Green, but against that Dallas Cowboys defense, granted, Cowboys are getting a couple of defensive starters back.
Orlando Scandrick coming back.
But I think that even against that kind of offense, I think AJ Green is still going to have a good fantasy wise.
Yeah, I think you start AJ Green with confidence. I don't see why you wouldn't. He's again another Julio Jones type. I don't like either running back for Cincinnati, so I think AJ Green's the person you go with. And then if I don't think Eifert's going to be healthy this week, but if Eifert is healthy, you start him. But I actually want to disagree with you. I think Ezekiel Elliott's a running back one. I think he's a running back one against this defense. Not because I love Ezekiel Elliott, I love that offensive line. And that offensive line, even though they just lost Lyle Collins for the season on IR, I still think that they're going to push people around. And Geno Atkins, great up front for the Bengals, but great pass rushing. He's like a Warren Sapp. If you can start running on him, it helps your pass game. So I like a lot Ezekiel Elliott in this matchup because I don't think that they're going to be able to get free in the secondary against some of these Bengals players.
No, I mean, I get it. I mean, I think that but I'm also pushing that towards, I put him as running back too, because I kind of looked at him not having Dez. So I think they'd be a little bit more into the box in pushing against Ezekiel Elliott. So now if Dez starts, yeah, my thought process moves a little bit. So, I mean, yeah, I kind of said it with the mindset of Dez not being available. Yeah. So that's where I kind of sat with it, but I see your whole point behind it as well. Bills at Rams. This one is one that I personally would stay away from because I just think that there's too many ifs. Rams offense, I'm not a fan of it. I think that we may see Todd Gurley see a little bit more production. I think he can, if they can get a little bit of production from him, they'll be okay. Bills, I think you see a lot. I think it's going to be a game of the running game. I think, quite honestly, I think you'll see LaShawn McCoy versus Todd Gurley.
Second lowest point total Over-under's 40. That means we're looking at like a 21-18 kind of game. My concern about this game is I love both defenses so much, and I hate both quarterbacks so much. And I just and I think offense comes down to quarterbacking. I like LaShawn McCoy. He'll get you 80 yards and a touchdown probably. I like Todd Gurley for the same thing. Other than that, stay away from Tavon Austin. I know that we said Robert Woods, good person to pick up on the waiver wire. He might be a good flex play. I just don't got a lot of other options aside from that defense and the two running backs.
I actually have one, and that's only if you need him, and that's Charles Clay.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
a good tight end. I think he's viable. I think he'd be okay. I think he'll do just fine against that Rams defense.
Taylor's got to get him the ball, though.
That's the problem. So there's that one. Chargers at Raiders. I'm actually going to be loving this game. If I know you're not high on Amari Cooper right now, but I think this could be a game that if you have Amari Cooper, start him. If you he's always your one. You're probably going to be your wide receiver too. But I think he's that guy that will have that big breakout game that we've been waiting for this whole season so far.
This is my fantasy fire game of the week, if you'll call it. Here's why. 52.5 points is the over-under. That's the highest of the week. Raiders have one of the top 5 offenses in the league. Chargers got done putting up 34 against the Saints. Means that they've got an offense even without Keenan Allen. They've got Melvin Gordon, they got Tyrell Williams, they got Hunter Henry. I think that it's going to be everyone chucking the ball around that field. And you've no longer got the infield dirt, which is a plus. So that means it's all on grass. So that means you're going to get your field goal kickers kicking some field goals. So I like both field goal kickers. That's right. Set it. Field goal kickers to start in this game if you want to find somebody that you're just starting week to week. Here's the reason I don't like Amari Cooper, though. Jason Verrett on that defense is going to line up against Amari Cooper. He's their best DB. You can pick on Brandon Flowers on the other side. You can pick on their DBs elsewhere. I like Michael Crabtree. I like Seth Roberts much more than I like Amari Cooper to get big this week. Although, if they don't play Verrett on Cooper all game, which I don't know why they wouldn't, but it's the Chargers. They always make these mistakes. Amari Cooper could have 1 or 2 big plays.
Another guy that I think you start quarterbacks, you start wide receivers on pretty much on both sides. On the Chargers side, is more of a flex option, but on the Raiders side, those are more of your number wide receiver 1s and 2s.
Mm-hmm.
What about I'm going to say his name wrong, Clive Wolford.
Clive Wolford,
the tight end for the Raiders.
He drops too many passes. I actually, if you were to pick up, I know that Clive Wolford's on some of your waiver wire pickups. The Raiders really like his athleticism, but he's got to stop dropping passes. And he also took a big hit because Derek Carr left him out to dry. Look, I love Derek Carr, number 1 rated fantasy or number 1 quarterback according to Pro Football Focus in the league right now. Red zone efficiency's off the charts. You want a tight end from the Raiders though? Look at Michael Rivera. They just lost Lee Smith for the season, which means that they're going to need to start a second tight end. They had Michael Rivera active this week, and Michael Rivera is a much better pass catcher in the middle of the field. I think they're going to start utilizing him more. I would say that Michael Rivera, deep daily fantasy league type sleeper if you're looking for somebody to get open at the tight end position.
We have 2 more games to get to in just a couple minutes to do it. Giants at Packers is in Lambeau, so I think that this will be a fun one. Another one that could be a gunslinging battle.
Yeah, I think that you start Jordy Nelson. I think that you start Randall Cobb, as we talked about.
As a flex, I think is a good option.
I think that you also start Eddie Lacy. You just watched that McKinnon got a touchdown. He had some good plays against that Giants defense. We also saw Asiata had a touchdown. So, again, you start your running back there for the Green Bay Packers. I think that you have a full arsenal. I'm not loving the tight end position, but if you need Richard Rodgers, start him as well.
As far as the Giants goes, quarterback, not a bad option. Against this Green Bay Packers defense, not a bad option. Wide receivers, I think I'd go after Victor Cruz more than anybody, but if you had an option, and of course you're going to start Odell Beckham Jr., but if you had another option, I would say Victor Cruz would be that guy. Buccaneers at Panthers. This is a Monday night game. You need to get a few fantasy points, and you're just down by 5. Who's looking good?
I think that you really want to focus in on the Tampa Bay Bucks. I know that we talked about how we're kind of concerned about Jameis Winston, but again, I'm coming back against this secondary. Like Mike Evans, I like Vincent Jackson, who you might have on the waiver wire still as a pickup. Cameron Brate, you might have. Jameis Winston, definitely somebody you can go with. On the flip side of Carolina, I think that if you've got to start a Carolina player and they're out there, go get Ted Ginn Jr. He's going to be an available player. He's going to get you both punt return yardage, and he could have a big play. And even if Cam Newton doesn't start, Derek Anderson can find an open receiver, and that's Ted Ginn Jr.
On the Buccaneers side, and now of course there may be no Doug Martin. He's injured. I don't know what his true status may be, but he may be out for a couple more weeks. former St. Mary's product right here in Stockton, California. Got to throw
Teach
it
me
out
how
there.
to Dougie.
Chris Ivory. See where you got me going. Chris Sims, maybe a possibility. I don't, the running back is questionable on the Buccaneers side, but you always got Mike Evans. He's going to be fantastic for you. So, before we go, anything left?
I just want one more on this game. If you got Kelvin Benjamin, start him as well. Good player to start there. Thanks, y'all, for having us.
All right. So that will do it for us. Thank you all for tuning in. Once again, the rebroadcast will be on Thursday from 10 a.m. to 12. We will be back next Tuesday live from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Thank you all for tuning in. I am JD Jeff Dominic along with the professor, Stephen Farias, and we'll be back later on. And don't forget to also check in 209 Sports. That will be from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. tonight, Tuesday night. Thank you all once again. Have a great night.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. But every driver seeks the pinnacle of their achievements. The odds of him Daytona 500